In high school, my brother and I played football, the American kind, for a coach that would ask us to do impossible things. And I'll give you an idea. But to give you this idea, I need to explain some of the basics of how American football works. So you've got the quarterback who stands there, he throws the ball, and then you've got all those really big men, 130-kilo men, maybe more, they're standing up front. So those are linemen. And I was the lineman, my brother was the lineman, this is the position we played. And as a lineman, what your role is to fill gaps. So what's a gap? A gap is a space. So you've got the A gap, the B gap, the C gap, right? And you are assigned one of these, and you get down in your three-point stance, 1, 2, 3, and when they hike the ball, you block the guy in your gap, okay? But sometimes our coach, he would assign us 2 gaps. And we'd say, Coach, how are we supposed to cover 2 gaps? And he just looked at us and he'd say, find a way. You know, it's pretty incredible what a child can do when someone who believes in them challenges to do more than what they thought was possible. What's even more incredible is what that does to the child. And what it did for my brother and I is it allowed us to find a way to create Remind, which is a messaging app that helps teachers work with their students and parents and is now one of the most widely used apps in U.S. education. So I'm going to tell you our journey, and that journey started with struggle, and then it turned into something that reminded us that teachers and the relationships they build are at the heart of our children's education. So this journey starts 9 years ago in 2008, so I'm going to go rewind back to then. So I got a phone call, and I looked at the caller ID, and it was my brother Brett calling from college. So I flipped open my phone, which is how we used to answer phones back in the day, and he exploded out of the speaker. Dave, I have an idea. What's your idea? All right, so I was in my room, and I was feeling so overwhelmed because I was trying to organize all of my assignments. And then I got a text from a friend, and I thought to myself, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? Why is this manual process here? Why can't I just receive text message reminders before my assignments are due? We should start a company. So I should explain to you why my brother felt so overwhelmed. When he grew up, he had ADD and dyslexia, and so he always struggled through school. It was always very difficult for him. If he ever saw a 9 on his report card, he was probably holding it upside down. And what's interesting in this case is that the same thing, the same condition that made his academic life so difficult allowed him to have this idea. You see, without struggle, there is no progress. And if he wasn't feeling the pain of this and how hard it was so much, he would never have thought of this idea. And he had such conviction. He really thought, we need to find a way to create this. It's going to help students. He saw something that other people didn't see, and that included me. And so the first thing we did was create a prototype. And this was really hacky. This was a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that ran on his laptop and sent text messages to students before their assignments were due. So at the end of the semester, we partnered with the university's telecommunications department, which is a really impressive way of saying that there was a professor who was nice enough to hand out surveys to his students. And what we found at the end of the semester is that over half of the students said that they would have forgotten about the exam or the assignment if not for these reminders. So we got really excited. We started talking to these kids. They even said, one of them told us that it was helping him sleep. You know, he was having those nightmares where you show up to the exam unprepared. We've had those. But anyways, we got really, really excited, and we thought we were onto something big. But it turns out that these students, as much as they told us they loved it, they weren't signing up. And I unfortunately can't tell you the details of the next 3 years because, I want everyone to leave this feeling positive and motivated and all that, good stuff. The next 3 years were not positive. We raised money from our family and friends. These were like regular people. They weren't rich investors. They worked at restaurants. We blew through it. We were at this low point, and we felt like we had basically spent the 3 years failing. And then we found out about this program, or these programs called incubators. And what incubators do is they give founders a little bit of money and mentorship, both of which we needed badly. And so we applied. We applied to about a half a dozen. We got rejected by about a half a dozen. And then we found one that was just focused on education startups. And so we figured it would be easier to get into this one. We applied. They accepted us. We quit our jobs, and in 2 weeks, we booked a ticket. We moved all the way out to the West Coast in Palo Alto, California, into a one-bedroom apartment. So it was welcome to Silicon Valley. It was time to try something new. So when we got there, I should tell you, my dad, he used to ask us this question. He used to say, "Boys, do you know how I got my good judgment?" "How, Dad?" "From my experience." "And do you know how I got my experience?" "From bad judgment." So we had accumulated all of this experience from our bad judgment, right? This was helping students academically. They wanted it. They said they wanted this, but they just weren't signing up. And then we realized something. Maybe for the last 3 years, we were focused on the wrong person. Maybe the best way to help the students is actually by helping the teachers. And we reasoned into this idea from kind of two perspectives. The first one is based on this contract that's existed for like forever between teachers and students. This thing is like really old, since the beginning of education. All right, this is how it works. The teacher tells the student to do something, right? And then the student, they go off and do it. Now, the student doesn't always abide by this contract, but generally speaking, this is like the main thing that teachers do every day. All right, and so what we figured was, if we build something for teachers that solves their problem, that they love, well then maybe they'll tell all their students to sign up and their parents to sign up. The second reasoning we had was a piggyback on this first one, and it was based on this idea that teachers have leverage impact. And this is a very powerful idea. We backed into it with some very simple math. So we wanted to help kids, and in the United States, there's about 100 million students and parents. And we figured, at the rate we've been going, it's going to be very hard to sign up 100 million people. But there's only 3.7 million teachers. So again, maybe if we build something that these 3.7 million teachers love, that solves their problem, then they'll tell the 100 million students and parents to sign up. So this idea of leveraged impact, that we can rely on these teachers and build something for them, very powerful. It's actually one of our company values, teacher obsessed, and I think that it extends beyond education. Anyways, the hypothesis here was clear. If we wanted to help students, we really needed to help teachers. Now, if we were right about this, it means that we were asking the wrong question for 3 years. The question wasn't, what do students want? The question was, what do teachers want? So this was our directive. What we were going to do was talk to teachers, build an app for them, something that they wanted. There was just one minor problem. Neither my brother or I knew how to build an app. But we didn't know what teachers wanted either. So while I was locked in my room learning how to code, my brother was talking to teachers. And keep in mind, we had no idea what we were doing. So my brother, he wasn't just talking to them. He really cared. He was building relationships with them. He knew their kids' names, he knew their dogs' names, and what he found is that communication in education hasn't changed much for like 50 years, okay? Schools still use the intercom system to send announcements to their entire school. We said to teachers, why don't you just use email? Kids don't check email. That's what they told us. Kids don't check email. We said, all right, well, what about phone calls? Do you know how long it's going to take to call 30 parents? It takes forever. All right? And then there's another one. It's called the Child Delivery Service. It's very popular in the United States. I don't know if you have it here. Probably you do, but the way it works is the teacher has something to share with the parent. So she, puts it on a piece of paper. She gives it to the child to give to the parent. They take it. They usually put it in the backpack, shoved at the bottom. You have it? You have it. Okay, I hear you have it. But what about all this new technology? Why can't they text message? Teachers would tell us, this is obvious in retrospect, but they would say to us, look, my kids text all day. I know they would respond to it, but I can't have a teenager's phone number, and I certainly don't want a bunch of teenagers to know my phone number. Fair. Well, what about social media? Look, I've got a private life. I'd like to keep a private life. Also fair. Oh, and by the way, it needed to be accessible. So if there was a family that didn't have access to the internet or a smartphone, and it didn't work with that one family, as a teacher, I cannot use it. It needs to work with my entire class. All right. So what we built needed to be simple, because teachers are busy. It needed to be effective, so the students had to actually read the messages, okay? And it had to be accessible, that if they didn't have access to technology, it still had to work for them. So the solution, what we built was very simple. It allowed teachers to send a one-way broadcast announcement to their entire class over text message without sharing phone numbers. That was V1. So the first people that we shared this with were the teachers that my brother had been talking to. And by this point, they had become friends. And these teachers freaked out. Like, you have to understand, they're used to really clunky, bad software that gets imposed on them, right? And where they have a question, they wait a week to get a response from some robot. My brother, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, answering support tickets on a first-name basis. And when these teachers, when they had like a feature request, it would show up in the app the next day. And then they started to share it. And when a teacher signed up, she would get 30, 50, 100 students and parents to sign up. And then they would use social media, and it would go from one school to another. And right now, 6 years later, we have an active teacher in over 70% of the schools in the United States and over 23 million monthly active users. That's enough people. I don't know where Amsterdam Stadium is, but you could fill it 427 times with that many people. But the best part about this is that it was just as popular in the low-income schools that need it the most. You know how sometimes you meet somebody that's so wise that you don't really get what they're trying to say to you until years later? So for us, that was Paul. Paul was one of the first investors to see Remind. And this guy, he's forgotten more about startups than most investors ever learn. What are they using it for? He was grilling us. I don't know, reminders, updates, don't forget to study, classes canceled, homework change, I guess. Are you sure? Are you sure that's all they're using it for? It took us 3 years to realize that's not all they were using it for. Now, one of the benefits of growing so quickly is that you accumulate a lot of data. And you can analyze that data to understand how your users are using the product. And at first, they were using it in much the same way that we told Paul, for reminders and for updates. This was how we built the product. It encouraged the users to use it in this way, and it was in the name. But then we noticed that teachers started using it, we released features that allowed them to broaden their communication. So they were able to send individual messages to a student or to a parent, and they were able to have group conversations, and they were able to send photos, which allowed them to have richer conversations. And what we noticed is that they started using it for more than just necessary messages. Teachers would send photos to the parents of their kids in school, and they wouldn't do this to show how the kids were behaving or what they were learning. What's really interesting after talking to these teachers is to understand that the effect that this has is that it reminds the parent that they have a partner who cares about their child. And we talk to teachers and they say, since I've been using this, parents are more involved. They get more engaged. And teachers were also using Remind to extend learning so that it doesn't end when the bell rings. We've got a teacher in North Carolina, and he sends science-related articles home to the parents and the students because he figures, they come home, and the same question, what did you learn today? The same answer, nothing. So this way they can say, what did you think of the article, right? So one day he opened up Remind, and he found a message waiting from one of the mothers because of the article that he sent out. She said, I woke up early in the morning with my son to stare into the night sky and look for Venus. Thank you for that moment. Those are the moments where these children decide to become scientists or go into astrophysics. And these kids, they teach us things all the time. There was this one young girl, she posted a tweet, and she said, my teacher sends me messages in the morning, and it makes me feel like she cares about me. And I was so confused by this. For months, I was wondering, why does this girl feel special when her teacher is sending an announcement to the entire class? And then I talked to a friend of mine who's much smarter than me, and she explained what was hiding in plain sight. She said, David, she got it on her phone. It doesn't matter that it went to the entire class. It was on her phone. She felt like it was for her. James Comer, he's a professor, and he studied for the better half of his life psychology and its impact on children and education. And what he said was that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. And that was the answer to Paul's question. Teachers are using Remind to build relationships with their students and with their parents. And people ask me all the time, is there research that suggests that sending text message to parents and students improves their grades and their outcomes? And there's a bunch of research that does suggest that. But just like teachers do more than update parents, student learning is about more than just academic outcomes. This is an idea that really resonates with me because I was a pretty bad student. And in high school, my football coach, he basically tricked me into playing. He told me that I could be really good. And I'm sure that most of you have at least one adult in your life that's had this order of magnitude impact on you. Coach Agofsky impacted me more than any adult in my childhood other than my parents. And the reason that I believed him when he told me what he told me, and he tricked me, is because I saw that he believed in me. And that opened me up to the values that he instilled in me through the examples that he set. And these are things like hard work and respecting others' differences. And of course, finding a way, which is another one of our values. See, Coach Agofsky made us believe that we could do more than what we thought we were capable of. He taught us that if we believed something strong enough and that we thought we should pursue it, like giving every student the opportunity to succeed, which is our official vision, then we had to find a way to make it happen. As children, the people that we learn from can change our lives forever. There's a quote that teachers affect eternity. There's no telling where their influence stops. And this change and this influence on these students, it impacts more than just their academic outcomes. It goes to inform the values and the character traits that they embody as the adults that they grow into. And this is why we do not believe that technology will improve education, but that technology can help people improve education. What started with struggle turned into a reminder that teachers and the relationships they build are at the heart of a child's education.